She was already dead by the time the pastor realized the truth, and the boy standing in the rain was the only one left to tell it. "I've been waiting for you," the boy said, his voice steady despite the storm. "You just didn't know it until now. If I help him, I lose everything. If I walk away, I lose who I am." The pastor gripped the steering wheel tighter, staring at the child through the rain-soaked windshield. The rain hit the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists. Pastor David Nwoy didn't slow down at first. His black SUV cut through the flooded road, headlights slicing the darkness, wipers moving in a frantic rhythm that matched the storm in the sky. Inside, it was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that followed a powerful sermon. Minutes earlier, thousands had stood on their feet, clapping, shouting, calling his name. "Papa, Papa, Papa." He had smiled, lifted his hands, received it all. Now, alone in the car, that energy had faded, replaced by something else, a strange heaviness. He adjusted his cufflinks, gold, custom-made. Everything about him was precise, controlled, built from nothing. He remembered when he had nothing, sleeping on church benches, praying for food, crying silently so no one would hear. Now, he owned one of the largest ministries in the country, private jets, properties, influence, power. And yet, he exhaled slowly. "Why do I feel like this?" he muttered under his breath. The driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror, but said nothing. The rain intensified. Then suddenly, "Sir, look." The car slowed. At first, Pastor David didn't see it. Just a broken structure by the roadside. Half-collapsed zinc roofing. Mud everywhere. Then lightning flashed. And in that split second, someone appeared. A boy. Small, thin, completely drenched. Sitting under what little cover the broken shelter offered. Pastor David frowned. Why is he not running? The driver shrugged. "Street children, sir, they survived somehow." But something felt off. The boy wasn't shivering. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't even looking around. He was focused. "Wait," Pastor David said suddenly. "Reverse." "Sir," I said reverse. The car slowly backed up, tires splashing water. Now the headlights landed directly on the boy. And that's when Pastor David saw it clearly. The boy was holding a book. Not just holding it, reading it. No, not reading. Reciting. His lips moved steadily, eyes fixed on the worn-out pages that were already half destroyed by rain. But his voice carried, even through the storm. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Pastor David froze. The boy's voice didn't shake, didn't stutter. It was calm, deep, certain. "For thou art with me?" The pastor slowly opened the car door. Rain poured in immediately, soaking his expensive shoes within seconds. But he didn't care. Something pulled him forward. Step by step, he walked toward the boy. The mud clung to his feet. His clothes grew heavy. The storm wrapped around him like a test. He didn't understand. Still, the boy didn't look up. "Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." Pastor David stood there now, right in front of him, watching, listening, confused. "How?" he whispered, almost to himself. The boy finally stopped. Slowly, he lifted his head. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted. Not outside, inside. The boy studied him quietly like he had been expecting him. Then he spoke. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." Pastor David blinked. "What?" The boy tilted his head slightly, rain running down his face. But his expression remained calm. "God told me you would pass here tonight." A pause. A long one. The pastor felt his chest tighten. That's not possible," he said, forcing a small laugh. "Do you even know who I am?" The boy didn't answer immediately. He just looked at him deeply, then said softly, "Yes." The thunder cracked loudly above them, and for the first time in years, Pastor David felt something close to fear. Pastor David took a step closer, water sloshing around his shoes. Who are you?" His voice trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. The boy's eyes didn't waver. "I am just a boy," he said calmly, tilting the Bible slightly so the rain didn't ruin it further. But God told me to wait for you. David's heart skipped a beat. Wait for me? Why me? The boy's lips pressed together. Because someone like you needed to see something you couldn't ignore. A flash of lightning illuminated the boy's small, soaked frame. His clothes were rag, his face pale, but his eyes, they burned with a wisdom that made David instinctively step back. He had preached to thousands, advised presidents, counseled the lost, but he had never felt like he was being studied, judged, examined by a child. Study me? You're just a child. David barked, his voice rising over the storm. I may be a child, the boy said, voice soft yet unwavering. But I know things you think only your years, your sermons, your riches can teach. David's chest tightened. He wanted to laugh, but the sound caught in his throat. Something about the boy, something in the way he spoke, felt like a challenge. The pastor looked around. The rain poured like a curtain, lightning revealing the muddy, half-flooded road, the debris from the shelter, the broken fences of abandoned homes lining the street. I should leave, David muttered. This is insane. The boy shook his head. No, you came here. You will not leave until you understand. David swallowed hard, suddenly aware how small and powerless he felt in that storm. Years of preaching, billions accumulated, influence stretching across the country. None of it mattered now. One child, soaked and shivering in the rain, had the power to make him question everything. You talk as if you know me, David said, voice cracking slightly. How could you? You've never been inside my church, never spoken in my office. You don't know my life. I know what God tells me, the boy said simply, holding the Bible close to his chest. I know what he says about you. David froze. His mind raced. Who could this boy be? A street prophet? A coincidence? Or something more? Lightning struck again, closer this time. The roar of thunder vibrated through his chest. He stepped back, almost stumbling in the mud. Tell me, what do you know? He demanded. The boy tilted his head. I know you have forgotten the person you were before you became what you are. I know you built a life of power, and in doing so, you've lost sight of something important. David's hand went to his chest, over his heart. He couldn't speak at first. He felt exposed, unmasked, vulnerable in a way no boardroom, no sermon, no applause had ever made him feel. Do you think you can judge me? He whispered finally. I do not judge, the boy replied, but I can show you. The boy slowly opened the Bible, rainwater dripping from the torn edges. His small fingers hovered over a page before tracing the words. Then, almost without warning, he began to recite an entire chapter, not just from memory, but with understanding, emotion, and clarity that made David's mind reel. It was Psalm 23. Every word, every pause, every emphasis, it hit David like a thunderclap. He recognized the scripture, knew the meaning, but the boy spoke it as if he had lived it, suffered it, breathed it. David staggered back, clutching the door of the SUV. How do you know this? You're just a boy. The boy's eyes met his again. I am a boy, he said quietly, but I listen, I see, I remember, and I understand more than you think. A cold chill ran down David's spine. This encounter, impossible as it seemed, had already begun to change something inside him, something primal, raw, and undeniable. He wanted to retreat, to leave, to get back into his warm, safe car, and ignore the storm and the boy. But deep down, he knew he couldn't. Not tonight. Not ever. He swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. If you're right, what am I supposed to do? The boy leaned slightly closer, rain running down his face. You will see. But first, you must face yourself. The thunder rolled again, louder this time, echoing across the empty street. David shivered, not from the rain, but from the realization that everything he thought mattered was about to be challenged by someone he had no right to take seriously. Pastor David Moy took a step back, mud squelching beneath his shoes, and stared at the boy. The storm pounded relentlessly, lightning illuminating the soaked figure in sharp, white flashes. He had faced enemies, thieves, even schemers in boardrooms, but nothing like this. You're saying I've forgotten who I am? Pastor David Moy's voice cracked. That I've lost my way? The boy nodded slowly, eyes steady. You built churches, amassed wealth, commanded respect. But inside, you are afraid. Afraid to see the truth about yourself. Afraid to admit you neglected more than just your faith. Pastor David Moy swallowed. Throat dry. Neglected what? People, the boy said. People who needed you and you ignored. People who prayed while you preached. Cried while you counted blessings you didn't deserve alone. Pastor David Moy's hands clenched at his sides. Heat and rain battled over him, and he felt suddenly trapped. One child, small drench, had dismantled years of pride in minutes. You don't know what it's like, Pastor David Moy said harshly. Do you? To carry everything? To feed thousands? To lead millions? To be responsible for the lives of so many? I know responsibility, the boy said softly, but responsibility isn't about power. It's about truth, and you've forgotten it. Pastor David Moy's chest tightened. Anger bubbled inside him, raw and defensive. And what would you have me do? Drop everything? Run into the streets, beg, and serve like I did when I was a boy? The boy shook his head. No, you'll do what you can, but you cannot hide anymore. Not from me, not from yourself. Pastor David Moy swallowed. His pulse thundered in his ears. He wanted to argue, to leave, to drive away into the comfort of his insulated life. But curiosity, that unexplainable pull, kept him rooted. Then tell me, Pastor David Moy said finally, who are you? Why do you know this? The boy held the Bible close, rain dripping from the pages. I have no name that matters. I have no home. I have nothing except what God has given me. And he gave me a message for you. Pastor David Moy frowned, rain running down his temples. A message? Yes, the boy said, voice steady. A message you need to hear tonight. A message you cannot ignore. If you leave, if you choose comfort over truth, you will regret it forever. Lightning struck again, casting everything into sharp black and white shadows. Pastor David Moy felt exposed in the storm, vulnerable, stripped of his usual armor of status, wealth, and sermons. The boy stepped slightly closer, small feet sinking into mud, drenched hair plastered to his forehead. You see, I have been waiting, not for you to see me, not for you to recognize me, but for you to see yourself, to remember who you are, to remember who you were before you thought you were untouchable. Pastor David Moy felt a knot in his stomach. Images flashed through his mind. Empty church halls he had ignored, people who had begged for help, children who had trusted him and been left behind. Each memory cut deeper than any sermon ever could. Why me? Pastor David Moy whispered. Why tonight? The boy's eyes glimmered. Because God said someone important would pass here tonight. And if you choose rightly your life, your ministry, everything you think you control will change forever. Pastor David Moy staggered, gripping the SUV door for balance. Rain pelted him like shards of ice. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside him. His life, his choices, everything he had built. It all seemed suddenly fragile, meaningless, except for this moment. He wanted to retreat, to hide behind his power, behind his sermons, behind his wealth. But he knew he couldn't. Then what do I do? Pastor David Moy asked, voice trembling. The boy smiled faintly, almost like a sun breaking through clouds. You watch, you listen, and you choose. But choose wisely, because you will never get another chance like this. The thunder rumbled low, long, echoing across a deserted street. And for the first time in decades, Pastor David Moy felt smaller than the world, powerless and terrified. Pastor David Moy's heart pounded as he stared at the boy. Rain streaked his face. Mixing with sweat, he didn't realize he had been holding back. The wind howled, rattling the ruined shelter, but the boy remained calm, almost impossibly still, a small beacon of focus amidst chaos. The boy opened the Bible wider, fingers tracing a passage that looked almost like a lifeline in the storm. Pastor David Moy, he said, his voice calm yet carrying the weight of judgment. You have spent your life building an empire of faith, but you've forgotten the faces behind your sermons. The faces of those who prayed for help while you preached for applause. Pastor David Moy's jaw tightened. You don't know what it's like to carry the weight I do, to guide thousands, to shepherd millions. You don't know responsibility. I know responsibility, The boy said quietly, but every word struck like lightning. Responsibility is not measured in wealth, influence, or numbers. It's measured in the lives you touch, the promises you keep, and the truth you live. You have failed, and you will fail again if you continue to hide behind your success. Pastor David Moy clenched his fists. So, what do you want to do? Run into the streets like a beggar? Serve every broken soul I ignored. The boy's eyes glimmered. No, you will act with your power, your influence. But you will act, or you'll be remembered for what you ignored, not for what you built. Pastor David Moy's chest tightened. He wanted to retreat, to escape the storm, the boy, the confrontation. But he knew he couldn't. Not tonight. Tell me the truth, Pastor David Moy said, voice low, trembling with both fear and curiosity. Why me? Why now? The boy looked down for a moment, then lifted his gaze, piercing through the rain like an arrow. Because someone's life is in danger. Someone you've ignored. Someone who trusts you, who prayed for you to see them before it's too late. And God told me to wait for you. Pastor David Moy felt a cold chill run down his spine. Who? Who's in danger? The boy hesitated, as if weighing the burden of his next words. Then he spoke, voice steady, almost too calm for the storm raging around them. It's the daughter of the church member whose letters you ignored. The one who left because she begged you for help years ago, and you were too busy preaching your sermons. Pastor David Moy froze. Rain fell into his eyes, blurring the world around him. Memories surged unbidden. Letters unopened on his desk. The face of a girl he had never seen. The faint guilt he had buried behind prayers. Accolades and piles of donations. You mean? Pastor David Moy whispered, voice barely audible over the storm. She's alive? She's still in danger? Yes, the boy said. And if you do nothing, the consequences will not only touch her, but everyone who believes in the church you built. You must act, but the choice is yours. Pastor David Moy's mind raced. If he acted, he risked his reputation, his empire, his influence. People would question him. Betrayals could surface. Enemies would watch and wait for him to fail. But if he did nothing, if he walked away, the guilt would consume him, perhaps destroy him from within. His hands shook, gripping the SUV door tightly. If I help, I lose everything. If I walk away, I lose who I am. The boy's gaze never wavered. Then choose, Pastor David Moy. Choose before the storm passes, because time is slipping and so is her life. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the mud, the broken shelter, the boy standing resolute. Pastor David Moy felt his breath catch. He had never been tested like this, never confronted so directly with the consequences of inaction. And in that moment, he realized something he had long avoided. This child, soaked and trembling, was not just asking for action. He was asking for courage. Courage he had preached about, but rarely lived. Pastor David Moy exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of decades pressing down on him. Every choice from this moment forward would define him, either redeem him or destroy him. Pastor David Moy's mind raced. Rain drummed relentlessly against the SUV, thunder rattling the remnants of the broken shelter. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to drive away, to hide in the familiar comfort of wealth, influence, and sermons. But he couldn't. Not tonight. Tell me exactly, where is she? Pastor David Moy asked, his voice low but urgent. The boy closed the Bible, the soaked pages sticking together. She is not far, but time is short. You have to move carefully. People are watching. Pastor David Moy's pulse thundered. Watching? Who? The boy's gaze hardened. The ones who profit when the vulnerable suffer. The ones who smile in the church pews while hiding greed behind holy words. They will not welcome your interference. Pastor David Moy felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just about saving a girl. It was about confronting the corruption he had ignored, the blind spots in the empire he had built. Every step forward could unravel everything. He took a deep breath, rain dripping from his hair into his eyes. I have to go. But how do I find her? The boy stepped closer, small feet sinking into the mud. Follow me, but you must listen. Every choice you make tonight will have consequences. Some will be immediate, Others delayed. You will face betrayal, confusion, and fear. You cannot hesitate. Pastor David Moy swallowed hard, gripping the SUV door. I've never done anything like this. I've guided people from pulpits, not alleys. The boy smiled faintly, almost like a flicker of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Faith without action is just words, Pastor David Moy. Tonight, your faith will be tested. Pastor David Moy stepped out fully now. Mud clung to his expensive shoes. Rain soaked through his suit, making the fabric heavy against his body. He had never felt so exposed, so human, so unprotected. And yet, he felt alive. They moved quickly, slipping through back streets, puddles splashing with each hurried step. Pastor David Moy kept glancing over his shoulder, wary of the shadows, wary of anyone watching. Every instinct screamed danger, but he couldn't turn back. Why me? Pastor David Moy asked again, voice trembling. Why this responsibility? Because God chose you, the boy said. Because you will either rise to the challenge or fall, and your empire will crumble in ways you cannot imagine. Every soul you've guided, every life you've touched, it all depends on what you do now. Pastor David Moy's chest tightened. The weight of his empire, his congregation, his own ego, it pressed down on him like a mountain. And yet, standing there, drenched, exposed, in the middle of a storm, he realized that everything he built was meaningless if he could not act when it mattered most. They turned a corner, and Pastor David Moy glimpsed a dimly lit alley. The girl was there, a small figure, huddled under a torn tarp, eyes wide with fear. She looked up at him, hope and terror blending into one. Pastor David Moy's heart ached. He had preached protection, salvation, guidance, and yet here in the rain, he saw the consequence of neglect. The boy whispered, "Now, act, before they notice you." Pastor David Moy took a step forward. His mind raced. Every choice was a risk. Every hesitation could cost her life. And still, he moved, because for the first time in decades, he understood that faith without action was nothing. The shadows around them shifted. Figures emerged from the darkness. Faces obscured by hoods, eyes cold and calculating. Pastor David Moy froze for a heartbeat, then squared his shoulders. "I will not fail," he whispered to himself. "Not tonight." Lightning struck again, illuminating the alley. Pastor David Moy felt every nerve on edge. This was the moment that would define him, not as a preacher of words, but as a man of action. Pastor David Moy's shoes sank in the mud as he moved toward the girl. The storm raged around them, rain slashing sideways, lightning painting the alley in stark contrasts. Every sense was heightened, sight, sound, smell, the raw pulse of danger thrumming in his veins. The girl huddled under the tarp, shivering, eyes wide as she recognized him. Relief flickered briefly across her face, then fear returned. You came," she whispered. Pastor David Moy knelt down slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Yes, you're safe now." "I'm here," he said, voice steady despite the chaos. "I won't let anything happen to you." The boy stepped behind them, scanning the shadows with a calm intensity. "They're close," he warned. "Those who profit from fear, they're watching every move. You can't hesitate." Pastor David Moy's heart thumped. His mind raced. Escape routes, the girl's safety, potential witnesses. He could feel the weight of every decision pressing down. One misstep, one delay, and it could all end here. From the darkness emerged a figure, hooded, moving quickly yet silently. The rain masked the sound of his steps, but the instinct to flee or fight surged through Pastor David Moy instantly. "Who's there?" he demanded, rising to his full height, soaked suit clinging to his body. The figure stopped a few meters away, face partially hidden. "Going somewhere, Pastor?" The man's voice slithered like smoke. "Thought you might be interested in protecting what's not yours." Pastor David Moy's pulse quickened. He recognized the arrogance, the sense of entitlement. This was the first collision. The antagonist challenging not only the girl's safety, but his authority, his morality, and his courage all at once. "Step back," Pastor David Moy said, his voice firm despite trembling hands. "You're putting a child in danger. Leave now." The man laughed, A short, harsh sound that carried over the storm. Danger? You have no idea, Pastor. You've been too busy preaching to see what's really happening. That girl, she's worth more to me than your sermons, your donations, your followers. Walk away, and maybe I let her live. Pastor David Moy's stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed to flee, but he couldn't. Not now. Not after the boy's warning. Not after the eyes of the girl staring up at him, trusting him. I won't, Pastor David Moy said firmly. No matter what it costs me. The boy stepped closer, calm and collected. Stay focused, Pastor David Moy. Fear is their weapon, not yours. Use your mind, not your fists. The antagonist's grin widened, and he took a slow step forward, shadows shifting with him. Very well. Then you will fight with your mind. Let's see if your sermons prepare you for reality. Pastor David Moy felt sweat and rain mixing on his forehead. His chest tightened. Every decision from here on out could tip the scales. One wrong move, one hesitation, and the girl could be lost. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the tense standoff. The rain pelted down. The mud sucked at their feet, and the cold seeped into every bone. But Pastor David Moy found a strange clarity amidst the chaos. This wasn't about sermons. It wasn't about prestige. It wasn't even about faith in the abstract. This was about courage, action, and facing the consequences of choices he had long avoided. The girl whispered again, voice trembling. Please, don't let them hurt me. Pastor David Moy met her eyes, feeling every ounce of fear and hope collide. I promise, he said softly, voice carrying over the storm. I will protect you, whatever it takes. The antagonist's figure shifted, preparing to strike, or perhaps negotiate. Pastor David Moy's mind raced. Every second counted. Every heartbeat mattered. The boy whispered beside him, choose wisely, Pastor David Moy. This is where the first test begins. Pastor David Moy's eyes never left the figure in the shadows. Rain soaked through his clothes, clinging to his skin, but his focus was razor sharp. Every muscle tensed, every thought sharpened. This wasn't a sermon. This was survival, for the girl and for himself. Move closer, the antagonist said, voice calm, almost mocking. I want to see the fear in your eyes. Isn't that what drives you, Pastor? Fear. Pastor David Moy felt a shiver run through him. Fear? Yes, but he refused to let it control him. Not now. He took a careful step forward, keeping the girl behind him, hand lightly resting on her shoulder. I'm not afraid of you, he said. I'm afraid of what will happen if I fail. The antagonist's grin widened. Ah, humility. That's new for you. Usually you hide behind pride and gold-plated words. The boy standing beside Pastor David Moy's side whispered softly, watch him. Listen to what he reveals. There's more truth in his arrogance than in all your sermons combined. Pastor David Moy's mind raced. Every second mattered. He needed a plan. Something to distract, something to protect the girl, something to expose the antagonist. The boy's calm presence was a reminder. Strategy over strength. Lightning flashed. In that instant, Pastor David Moy acted. He stepped slightly to the side, scooping the girl up into his arms. The antagonist's eyes narrowed and he lunged, but Pastor David Moy was already moving, mud sucking at his shoes, rain blurring his vision. Stop, the antagonist shouted, but Pastor David Moy ignored him. He ran, ducking through the alley, instincts guiding him toward a narrower passage the boy had indicated. Every second the girl trembled against him, clinging to his wet suit. Behind them, the antagonist cursed. You think you can escape me? You think your empire can protect you now? This is real life, Pastor David Moy. Real consequences. Pastor David Moy's chest heaved, lungs burning. He didn't respond. Words were useless here. Actions mattered. And he had made a promise. They turned a corner, and Pastor David Moy spotted a small doorway, partially hidden beneath a torn tarp. Without hesitation, he ducked inside, placing the girl down gently behind some stacked crates. Rain lashed at the entrance, masking their presence. The boy followed silently, scanning the alley outside. He won't wait long, the boy said. Decide quickly. Your next move will define you. Pastor David Moy swallowed hard. His mind raced through every memory of his life, every sermon about courage, every lesson he had preached about protecting the vulnerable. All led to this moment. He crouched next to the girl. "Listen to me," he whispered, voice steady but urgent. "You're safe for now. I'm not leaving you. I promise." Her eyes filled with tears, and she whispered, "I thought no one would come." "You're stronger than you think," Pastor David Moy said, "and I will not fail you." Outside, the antagonist's footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate. Every shadow seemed to shift, every sound magnified in storm. Pastor David Moy's pulse thundered, mind racing. He needed information, a way to turn the tables, a strategy that could save the girl without sacrificing himself entirely. The boy leaned close. "He's testing you, Pastor David Moy. Not just your courage, but your judgment. Observe him. Learn his pattern. He underestimates you because he thinks power is only in wealth." Pastor David Moy nodded, determination flaring inside him. "Then we'll show him that power can come from action, from courage, from doing what's right when it matters most." The rain continued to batter the walls. The storm outside mirrored the tension in his chest. Lightning lit the alley again, illuminating the antagonist's figure lurking just beyond their hiding place. Pastor David Moy took a deep breath, gripping the girl's hand. Every instinct screamed danger. Every heartbeat reminded him that hesitation could cost a life. But he had made his choice. He would not back down. Not tonight. Pastor David Moy crouched behind the crates, rain pounding against the metal roof above, the girl trembling against him. The boy's eyes scanned the alley with sharp precision. "He's not just testing your courage, Pastor David Moy. He's testing your judgment. Watch carefully." From the shadows, the antagonist's voice slithered through the storm. "You can hide all you want, Pastor, but you cannot run from the consequences of your choices. Every empire has its cracks, and I've learned exactly where yours are." Pastor David Moy's pulse surged. Cracks? He had tried so hard to build perfection, to shield every weakness. And yet here in the rain and mud, the antagonist seemed to know them all. The boy whispered, "He's been watching you for years, Pastor David Moy. Not the church, not the sermons, you. Every decision, every hesitation, every moral compromise. He knows your pattern. That's why he chose tonight." Pastor David Moy swallowed hard, mind racing. The antagonist's audacity was terrifying. He had weaponized knowledge of Pastor David Moy's own life, exploiting his fears and regrets. Lightning flashed, illuminating the alley. Pastor David Moy glimpsed the antagonist, hooded and motionless, eyes calculating. "Why?" Pastor David Moy shouted, voice cutting through the storm. "Why target me? Why her? What do you want?" A slow, chilling laugh answered him. "Power, Pastor David Moy. Control. Influence over those who think themselves untouchable. That girl? She's a key to exposing your weakness, to proving that your faith, your empire, is just a house of cards." Pastor David Moy's chest tightened. Rage, fear, guilt, all collided into one. He had preached courage, defended the helpless, claimed justice. But now, faced with true danger, he realized how vulnerable he had allowed himself to become. The boy whispered urgently, "Listen, he thrives on fear and hesitation. Find his weakness. He trusts appearances too much. Your action, not words, will break him." Pastor David Moy clenched his fists. Every sermon, every prayer, every speech about morality seemed small compared to this moment. This was raw, brutal reality. The antagonist's power wasn't in strength or numbers. It was in manipulation, exploiting the cracks in Pastor David Moy's moral armor. The girl whispered, voice trembling, "Please, don't let him hurt me." Pastor David Moy's eyes met hers. He felt a surge of determination, a moral clarity that cut through the storm. "I will protect you," he said firmly. "No one will touch you, not while I'm here." The boy leaned closer, voice calm but urgent. "Now, Pastor David Moy, watch him carefully. Notice how he shifts his weight, how he manipulates the shadows. His arrogance will be his undoing." Rain fell harder, thunder rolling like a drum. Pastor David and Roy scanned the alley, every shadow, every movement. The antagonist was cunning, but the boy was right. Pride had a tell, and Pastor David and Roy intended to exploit it. He exhaled slowly, taking a step toward the crates, positioning himself between the girl and the alley's entrance. "Come," Pastor David and Roy shouted into storm. "Face me. If you want her, you'll have to face me." The antagonist's laughter cut through the wind, sharp and mocking. "Bold words, Pastor David and Roy. But bold words won't save you." Pastor David and Roy's hand shook slightly, but his resolve did not. Every instinct, every ounce of courage, every moral choice he had postponed in life had led him here. And now he would act, not for glory, not for wealth, but for life itself. Lightning illuminated the antagonist again, and in that flash, Pastor David and Roy saw it. A flicker of hesitation, pride, overconfidence, a crack in the armor that even a storm could not hide. The boy whispered, "There it is, use it, Pastor David and Roy." Now, Pastor David and Roy's heart hammered in his chest. Every step, every decision now carried weight. One wrong move, and the girl could be lost. One right move, and he could finally confront the darkness he had ignored for too long. Pastor David and Roy crouched behind the crates, rain pounding against the metal roof above, the girl trembling against him. The boy's eyes scanned the alley with sharp precision. "He's not just testing your courage, Pastor David and Roy. He's testing your judgment. Watch carefully." From the shadows, the antagonist's voice slithered through the storm. "You can hide all you want, Pastor, but you cannot run from the consequences of your choices. Every empire has its cracks, and I've learned exactly where yours are." Pastor David and Roy's pulse surged. Cracks? He had tried so hard to build perfection, to shield every weakness. And yet here in the rain and mud, the antagonist seemed to know them all. The boy whispered, "He's been watching you for years, Pastor David and Roy. Not the church, not the sermons, you. Every decision, every hesitation, every moral compromise. He knows your pattern. That's why he chose tonight." Pastor David and Roy swallowed hard, mind racing. The antagonist's audacity was terrifying. He had weaponized knowledge of Pastor David and Roy's own life, exploiting his fears and regrets. Lightning flashed, illuminating the alley. Pastor David and Roy glimpsed the antagonist, hooded and motionless, eyes calculating. "Why?" Pastor David and Roy shouted, voice cutting through the storm. "Why target me? Why her? What do you want?" A slow, chilling laugh answered him. "Power, Pastor David and Roy. Control. Influence over those who think themselves untouchable. That girl? She's a key to exposing your weakness, to proving that your faith, your empire, is just a house of cards." Pastor David and Roy's chest tightened. Rage, fear, guilt, all collided into one. He had preached courage, defended the helpless, claimed justice. But now, faced with true danger, he realized how vulnerable he had allowed himself to become. The boy whispered urgently, "Listen, he thrives on fear and hesitation. Find his weakness. He trusts appearances too much. Your action, not words, will break him." Pastor David and Roy clenched his fists. Every sermon, every prayer, every speech about morality seemed small compared to this moment. This was raw, brutal reality. The antagonist's power wasn't in strength or numbers. It was in manipulation, exploiting the cracks in Pastor David and Roy's moral armor. The girl whispered, voice trembling, "Please, don't let him hurt me." Pastor David and Roy's eyes met hers. He felt a surge of determination, a moral clarity that cut through the storm. "I will protect you," he said firmly. "No one will touch you, not while I'm here." The boy leaned closer, voice calm but urgent. "Now, Pastor David and Roy, watch him carefully. Notice how he shifts his weight, how he manipulates the shadows. His arrogance will be his undoing." Rain fell harder, thunder rolling like a drum. Pastor David and Roy scanned the alley, every shadow, every movement. The antagonist was cunning, but the boy was right. Pride had a tell, and Pastor David and Roy intended to exploit it. He exhaled slowly, taking a step toward the crates, positioning himself between the girl and the alley's entrance. "Come," Pastor David and Roy shouted into storm. "Face me. If you want her, you'll have to face me. The antagonist's laughter cut through the wind, sharp and mocking. Bold words, Pastor David Moy. But bold words won't save you. Pastor David Moy's hand shook slightly, but his resolve did not. Every instinct, every ounce of courage, every moral choice he had postponed in life had led him here. And now he would act, not for glory, not for wealth, but for life itself. Lightning illuminated the antagonist again, and in that flash, Pastor David Moy saw it. A flicker of hesitation, pride, overconfidence, a crack in the armor that even a storm could not hide. The boy whispered, "There it is, use it, Pastor David Moy." Now, Pastor David Moy's heart hammered in his chest. Every step, every decision now carried weight. One wrong move, and the girl could be lost. One right move, and he could finally confront the darkness he had ignored for too long. Pastor David Moy's lungs burned as he pushed forward, guiding the girl up the narrow stairwell. Rainwater cascaded down the steps, making every move slippery, dangerous. His grip on her hand tightened. "Don't let go," Pastor David Moy said, voice strained but firm. "I won't," she whispered, breath shaky. Behind them, footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate. The antagonist wasn't rushing anymore. He was confident, too confident. The boy suddenly stopped. "Wait," he said quietly. Pastor David Moy froze mid-step. "What is it? We're almost out." The boy's eyes darkened slightly. "No, this is where it changes." A deep voice echoed from below. "You're right." The antagonist stepped into view at the base of the stairwell, no longer hiding, no longer pretending. This time his face was fully visible. Pastor David Moy's heart skipped. Recognition hit him like thunder. "No," Pastor David Moy whispered. "That's not possible." The man smiled slowly. "You finally see me, Pastor David Moy." It was someone from inside the church. Not just anyone. A trusted leader. A man who had stood on the altar, prayed beside him, handled finances. "Deacon Samuel," Pastor David Moy's voice broke. The girl gasped softly behind him. "Yes," the man said calmly, stepping closer. "The same Samuel you trusted. The same Samuel who watched you ignore cries for help while you built your empire." Pastor David Moy felt the world tilt. Betrayal, not from the outside, from within. "You," Pastor David Moy's voice trembled. "You've been doing this? Using the church? Using people?" Samuel's expression didn't change. "You left gaps, Pastor David Moy," he said coldly. "You were too busy being important to notice what was happening under your nose. People needed help. You gave them speeches. I gave them solutions." "Solutions?" Pastor David Moy snapped. "You call this evil solutions?" Samuel stepped closer, rain dripping off his coat. "I call it opportunity," he said quietly. "Desperation creates leverage, and you created plenty of desperate people." The words hit harder than any blow. Pastor David Moy staggered slightly, because deep down, he knew there was truth in it. The boy's voice came softly but firmly. "This is the cost of neglect, Pastor David Moy. Not just what he's done, but what you allowed." Pastor David Moy clenched his fists, eyes burning. "No," he whispered. "No, I didn't build this. I didn't." "You didn't stop it," the boy interrupted gently. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Samuel smirked. "And now here you are, trying to play hero. Too late." The girl tightened her grip on Pastor David Moy's arm. "Please don't let him take me." Pastor David Moy closed his eyes for a brief second. Everything slowed. The rain, the fear, the voices. And in that stillness, he made a decision. When he opened his eyes again, something had changed. Not fear, not doubt, clarity. "You're right," Pastor David Moy said quietly. Samuel blinked. "I failed," Pastor David Moy continued. "I ignored people. I chose comfort when I should have chosen responsibility." A pause. Then, "But tonight," his voice hardened, "I don't run from that anymore." Samuel's smile faded slightly. Pastor David Moy stepped down one step, then another, placing himself fully between Samuel and the girl. "You used my weakness, Pastor David Moy said. But you don't get to use her. Samuel's eyes narrowed. And what exactly are you going to do? Pastor David Moy's jaw tightened. Whatever it takes. The boy stepped forward slightly, his presence calm but powerful. This is the final test, he said softly. Thunder cracked violently above them. Samuel moved, fast. But this time, Pastor David Moy didn't hesitate. Samuel lunged forward, but this time, Pastor David Moy didn't freeze. He moved, instinct, not fear. He stepped down hard, blocking Samuel's path, his body fully shielding the girl. The impact sent a jolt through him, pain shooting up his arm, but he held his ground. You won't touch her. Pastor David Moy shouted, voice raw, breaking through the storm. Samuel staggered back slightly, surprised. That hesitation, that tiny crack, was all it took. Go! Pastor David Moy yelled. The boy grabbed the girl's hand instantly. This way, he said, pulling her up the remaining steps. She looked back once, eyes wide. What about you? I'll be right behind you. Pastor David Moy shouted. But even as he said it, he knew this moment might cost him everything. Samuel straightened, his expression no longer amused. It was cold now, focused, dangerous. You've changed, Samuel said quietly. Too late. Maybe, Pastor David Moy replied, breathing heavily. But it's enough for tonight. Rain poured harder, thunder shaking the stairwell. Water rushed down the steps between them, like a dividing line. Samuel took another step forward. So this is who you choose to be? He asked. A man who sacrifices everything for people who can't give you anything in return? Pastor David Moy didn't hesitate this time. Yes. The word landed heavy. Certain. Final. Samuel shook his head slowly. Then you're finished. Maybe, Pastor David Moy said again. But at least now, I know who I am. For a brief moment, silence cut through the storm. Then, sirens, distant at first. Then louder, closer. Samuel's eyes flickered, just for a second. But Pastor David Moy saw it. You planned this, Samuel said quietly, realization creeping in. Pastor David Moy exhaled slowly. No, he replied. But I finally stopped protecting the wrong things. The boy's voice echoed faintly from above. Pastor David Moy. Samuel glanced toward the sound. That was a mistake. Pastor David Moy stepped forward, forcing distance between Samuel and the exit. You're not going anywhere, Pastor David Moy said firmly. Samuel let out a quiet, almost impressed breath. All this for one girl. Pastor David Moy shook his head. No, he said, for every person I ignored. The sirens were close now. Flashing lights reflected faintly off the wet walls above. Samuel stepped back slowly, calculating. This isn't over, he said. You think exposing me fixes everything? There are more, deeper, bigger than you. Pastor David Moy held his gaze. Then I'll face him too. A long pause. Then Samuel turned and disappeared into a side passage, swallowed by darkness before the authorities could reach him. Pastor David Moy didn't chase him. For once, he chose differently. He turned and ran up the stairs. Bursting into the open street, rain pouring down, lights flashing red and blue in the distance. The girl stood there, shaking, wrapped in the boy's arms. She looked up the moment she saw him. You came back, she whispered. Pastor David Moy dropped to his knees in front of her, breath heavy, heart pounding. I told you I would, he said softly. She threw her arms around him, holding tightly. And for the first time in years, Pastor David Moy felt something real. Not applause, not power, not control, but purpose. He looked up to thank the boy, but he wasn't there. Pastor David Moy frowned, scanning the street. Where did he go? The girl pulled back slightly. The boy, she asked. Yes, Pastor David Moy said. The one who brought me here. She shook her head slowly. There was no boy, she said. Silence. The rain softened. The world seemed to pause. Pastor David Moy's chest tightened. No, he whispered. He was right here. He led me. But Deep down, he already knew this wasn't coincidence. This wasn't chance. This was something else. Something divine. Pastor David Moy slowly looked up at the sky, rain washing over his face like a quiet baptism. Tears mixed with it. Not of fear, not of loss, but of awakening. Everything he had built suddenly felt small compared to what he had just experienced. And for the first time in his life, Pastor David Moy understood what faith truly meant. Not words, not sermons, not power, but action, sacrifice, truth. The girl squeezed his hand. "Are you going to leave too?" she asked softly. Pastor David Moy looked at her, really looked, and this time, he didn't see responsibility. He saw a person. "I'm not going anywhere," he said gently, and he meant it, not just for tonight, but for everything that would come after, because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning, a new life, a new purpose, a new Pastor David Moy. If the story touched you, if it made you think, question, or feel something real, take a moment right now, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Because stories like this aren't just meant to be heard. They're meant to change us. And you never know, the next story might be yours.